Thanks for joining us again. The UN's Refugee Agency has said it is deeply concerned by the news that 4 refugees who were abducted in Kenya were returned to Turkey. The 4 were repatriated at the request of the Turkish government. Now, this is according to Kenya's foreign ministry. Meanwhile, Amnesty International's Kenya office says it's deeply concerned by reports that 7 asylum seekers from Turkey were abducted on Kenyan soil and the imminent forceful and unlawful return to Turkey. In a statement, the UNHCR has urged the government of Kenya to abide by their international legal obligations and in particular to respect the principle of non-refoulement forced return of refugees, which protects asylum seekers and refugees from any measure that could lead to their removal to a place where their life or freedom would be threatened. Well, to discuss this with me this morning on News Now, I'm joined by Irungu Houghton, Amnesty International Kenya Section Director, Nairobi, Kenya. Thanks for being here and taking time out to speak with us. Now, can you provide a brief overview of the case involving the abduction of Turkish nationals in Kenya? And I also understand that they have been forcibly returned to Turkey. Can you also shed more light on that?
Thank you very much for inviting Amnesty International Kenya to offer light on this very disturbing story that happened. So on the 18th of October, last Friday, 7 Turkish nationals who were refugees and protected under the United Nations were essentially kidnapped by the Kenyan authorities. We now know from the admission by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that this was a joint operation between the Kenyan law enforcement agencies and the Turkish government. Within 17 hours, four of the 7 Turkish nationals were essentially put on a plane and sent back against their wishes to the to Turkey. And the government has cited strong bilateral relationship, their strong bilateral relationships with the Turkish government. But our major concern has been that there was no evidence that any of these 4 individuals constituted a security threat, and therefore this essentially has been a refoulement or a forceful return to a country in which they feared risk of persecution.
All right. What specific human rights violations do you see occurring in this situation, particularly in the context of enforced disappearances?
Human rights violations. The first is the risk to the 4 individuals that are now back, we assume, in Ankara, Turkey, and the anguish to their families and friends. Most of the 4 Turkish refugees were very well known in Kenya. They had been living in Kenya for up to 20 years. They had built very strong relationships with Kenyans. And again, there was absolutely no evidence that has been provided that they were criminal or that they had broken any of the laws of Kenya. So I think the first one is essentially the violation to the risk that this poses to their lives. Secondly, as UN-protected refugees, they were subject to the protection of the Geneva Convention. This is a 1951 convention that's signed by all governments across the world. And it essentially says that no refugee can be returned back to their country of origin once they are protected as a refugee, unless there is a conviction against a serious crime that has been occurred or rather perpetuated against the host country in which they are currently located or in their country of origin. And that's under Article 33.2. But we again have seen none of this. I think the other danger that we expect is, what does this mean for the 780,000 refugees that live in Kenya and have sought the Kenyan government protection? What does this mean for those refugees as well?
Well, thanks so much for shedding light on this one as well. Thank you for joining us, Irungu Houghton, Amnesty International Kenya Section Director, all the way from Nairobi, Kenya. Thanks for talking with us.